Hi, I'm Tabitha Connor and I'm doing Jodi Picoult for my literature project. I chose Jodi because she is the only modern and American writer that I read. I like her because her stories are real. I like that she involves the real world and she does a lot of research before she does it. So it's not, her stories aren't just fiction. I'm not usually a huge fan of like fantasy because I like the real world. There's a lot to be talked about, and Jodi's not afraid to talk about things that are difficult. Jodi's 50 years old. She has published 26 novels in the last 25 years, 8 of which have debuted as #1 in the New York bestsellers list. She has written 2 short stories that were published by 17 magazine, and she wrote a couple series for DC Comics' Wonder Woman. She won the New England Bestsellers for Fiction Award, and she's accomplished a lot in her personal life as well. Jodi's first novel, Songs of the Humpback Whale, was written just after she got married while she was pregnant with her first child. She said that at the start of her career, when writing that story, she was pregnant at the time, and the story is about a developing mother-daughter relationship. I think that just like Amy Tan and Joy Luck Club, that relationship between child and herself really came out in that story, and she wasn't afraid to tackle the hard subjects when it came to that. In 2014, she says that her career became full circle when she wrote Leaving Time, which her youngest was headed off to college, and this story is about the loss between mother and child. That story for her was really important because she wrote a lot from her heart in that story, because she was her last baby was moving out of her house. Jodi does also a lot, like I said, she does a lot of research for her stories. When she did Leaving Time, she immersed herself so much in this story about elephants and loss that she actually went to Africa and studied elephants face to face with elephant psychologists, learning about how they handle grief in comparison to how humans and herself handled grief as she wrote it. In literature, a lot of the times we try to relate our author that we're reading to the real world, to ourselves, to what was going on at the time, what was going on in their personal life. And Jodi, you can see that in her stories. She wrote a story called Sing You Home in 2013. That story was published in 2013. That story, she said she had wanted to write for a while about LGBT, but she wasn't really sure where to come at from it. It really bothered her. She said in an interview with Ellen DeGeneres that the LGBT community is the last set of human rights that we have not granted in this country, which she is completely correct. You know, the right to marry is great, but we have a long way to go as far as rights in that community goes. And she wasn't afraid to tackle that topic. Ironically, while she was researching that story, her oldest son came out to her as gay. It didn't shock her and her husband, and she took it, she was the good family that a lot of us, pray and hope that we'll get when we come out. But Jodi, that her son coming out wasn't necessarily what inspired the story, but it is what directed the story. And I think that's really awesome for her, is that she takes something in the world that is bothering her, that she's thinking about, that is affecting people around her. She has family and friends who are part of the LGBT community, and it wasn't until her son came out that her story finally found its direction. It had its purpose already, but then she found its direction. Jodi also said that in her most recent book, Small Great Things, it's a story about race and discrimination, she had wanted to write about it for a while. She tried a few times to write about race, but she was never successful. But in 2013, there was a court case where an African-American nurse was kicked out of her room because the father of the newborn exposed a swastika tattoo and said that he wanted all African-Americans removed and barred from the room. And that bothered Jodi, that was still okay in this country in 2013. So her story, Small Great Things, without giving too much away, basically she says, what if something had happened to that baby when only that African-American nurse was in the room, and what if they went to court about that, and what if she had a white defender? And she's not afraid of that topic. And when this court case came about, she finally had like that. She couldn't let it go. It kept her up at night. I call this presentation The Stories That Haunt You, because that really is what Jodi does. She writes about things that bother her, things that, she sees in the world that are affecting her. A lot of people may be more familiar with her story, My Sister's Keeper. She wrote that story because some things were bothering her about the way that some babies are created in the medical field to help their siblings. It didn't necessarily bother her that it was happening, but she also wanted to know more about that. Like, what happens if they are successful in creating a baby that can help their sibling? And what about that child's feelings? Like, how is that child supposed to feel that they were only created to make another better? I like Jodi for that. I think one of her biggest merits is that she's not afraid of talking about topics that are hard to talk about. She says to CBS News when she's doing an interview with them that race is a hard thing to talk about. It's something we avoid, and that's a privilege. Being around LGBT people, that's, it's a hard topic to talk about, but it's a privilege not to. You don't know what people are going through in the world unless you're willing to put yourselves in their shoes, or, in Jodi's case, write about those characters. I love Jodi for that. She works really hard, and she's done a lot. She in her class day presentation at Princeton in 2016, she said that she became an accidental activist, and I think that is why her stories are so important. And as a woman's writer in the literature world, is that she's an activist. She writes about things that matter, things that affect the world, and things that are real. Her characters are real. The emotions in her stories are real. And so I think that's why Jodi would have been a really good author to talk about in this class. So I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation and learned a little bit about Jodi. Her name is Jodi Picoult. Her last name looks like it's Picoult, so it's Picoult. If you're looking her up, I definitely recommend it. She's a great author, and I hope you guys all have a great day. I look forward to your presentations.